Thank you,
Mr Brown. We now move on to Senator Ludlam. You have the call.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a fairly disparate set of questions, but I want to maybe bring you first to a piece that you're no doubt aware of that ran in the Financial Review this morning by James Hutchison, reflecting on some remarks that you made, Dr Switkowski, around private funding and risks attendant on private funding, particularly in the later stages of the build, where it was assumed under the previous business plan that the company would be profitable enough to raise its own debt without needing any kind of government guarantees. That's the basic outline to the argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
To take it a step further, you've acknowledged, and we've covered this ground a bit in the select committee hearings, that the company is likely to make a lower rate of return partly because of the technology mix that's been chosen, the fact that you can't sell the high-end products on some parts of the network or to some parts of your customer base. Is that also a reasonable contention?
I think the internal rate of return, which is now, firstly, I think the rates of returns in the original plan are easily subjected to challenge, and I don't think anybody should be confident to use them as a reference point.
We should nonetheless, we could have a whole sepaate argument about that.
Okay,
I want to talk about your assumptions for your project.
Okay, but park that. So our assumptions have quite different assumptions in terms of, for example, average revenue per user trends.
Yep.
And as a result of that and other things, you get an economic return at 5+% under the scenario that we're currently contemplating.
The part of the point that I'm making, though, is that your average revenue per user is sensitive to the kind of technology that you can put them on. If you've got a much larger fraction of your customer base parked in perpetuity on copper, you can't offer them the high-end products that you can offer customers in the fibre footprint to whom you will be charging more money.
Well, I mean, this is a topic that may well take us into next week, but
it's a fairly simple contention.
Because we have quite different views on this as we have in the past. You can assume, as I think an earlier plan assumed, that as you layer on higher speed products, that will drive your ARPU up at an attractive rate. Or you can say that consumer behaviour is such that for a relatively similar amount of dollars per month, users of broadband connectivity expect to get constantly improving speeds.
Which you can't offer them because they're going to be stuck on a fibre to the network.
No, and our assumption, and in a way our assumption is insensitive to assumptions around speed mix. What we say is consumers are going to pay whatever the wholesale price is in our model, $40 or thereabouts. It'll move up at, well, we have different scenarios, but at CPI. And then underneath it, you will have a set of assumptions as to speed tiers. I'll have a different set of assumptions, but at the end of the day, the residential consumer will still only pay $40 plus CPI. And that's quite a critical assumption. And I acknowledge other people can have an argument that says, oh, no, there will be a large market that's going to pay twice as much as that. And my response would be, I have yet to see it anywhere in the world.
We're already seeing it here in data provided to this committee and to the previous iteration of the joint committee into the NBN, that your customer base on the fibre footprint were taking up top tier products at a much higher rate than was predicted. And this is admittedly going back 4 or 5 years.
It's now asymptoting towards closer to prediction. And again, I'd caution anybody from extrapolating, as there is an inclination to do, the experience for the first 100,000 customers.
Why? Because you weren't just building the network into areas that were likely to have a high uptake. You were building it into rural and regional Tasmania and all over the place.
And I acknowledge that the geographic and demographic spread was typical, but the uptake in terms of early adopters was probably not. And so if I'd had to wave my hands around, which I know can't be captured, I would not be at all surprised.
The video broadcast will get it.
And I would not be surprised to find that the initial uptake was by bandwidth hungry early adopters, that as we add more customers, that'll come down to the assumed levels, and then as, with the passage of another year or two, as bandwidth-hungry applications become more popular, the bandwidth demand will increase, but the price won't. Now, that's a critical assumption. You may well want to debate that, but you'll be debating it against a panel, not just here, but experts that take a different view.
Okay, so you think that the rate of return that you're going to be able to provide back to the taxpayer or whoever ends up owning the company is insensitive to the technology mix that you're going to be stranding people on?
At the revenue level, that's probably true.
Wow.
If there are sharp changes in technology, that may change the costs.
No, I mean, I can't imagine these sharp changes in technology. I'm trying to compare people in the fibre footprint, who you can effectively offer an open-ended upgrade path as technology improves, to people, whatever it is, the 2/3 of the population that'll be stuck inside your copper footprint, who will have a ceiling imposed over their heads. And you won't be able to offer those top-tier services.
Again, just to go back to the strategic review conclusions, if we take 100% of the 12 million points of connection that will constitute the end of the rollout, of the 12 million, 1 million will be within the satellite and fixed wireless footprint, rounding out.
Yep.
11 million are left.
Yep.
Of the 11 million, about 3 million will be in an HFC footprint. Another 3 million will be in an all fibre footprint, and 5 million will be in a FTTN construct. So it's 5 out of the 12.
And you're submitting that that's likely to have no impact at all on your average revenue per user?
I think that is the assumption, because
Wow.
of the conviction that fibre to the node, the path that we're on in terms of speed tiers as we go from 25 to 50 in 2019 to 100 beyond that.
How are you going to go to 100?
Sorry?
In the fibre to the node footprint?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that without ripping these nodes out and just cabling people up? How are you going to go to a 100 meg service for fibre to the node?
Let's not get too far ahead. Beyond 2020, as these technologies that are currently being test-bedded in the laboratory, GFAST, etc., will get us into that triple-digit megabit per second bracket.
To the whole population, netting out those on wireless and satellite.
No. I mean, again, it'll be progressive initially, and again, the execution of this remains ahead of us. But you know that it is dependent upon distance from a node, and initially it'll be available to 300 metres from the node. Eventually 600 or 700. Once we get to 600 metres away, we've got, I think, 90% of the population in the copper footprint that are capable of getting these higher speeds. These are the sorts of details that I may actually be getting wrong, but which were part of the strategic review spreadsheet and model that underpin the conclusions that we drew.
I'll forgive you the details. I guess we'll have to agree to disagree that it's going to have no impact, but our time's a bit limited, so I'll need to move us on. Could you just confirm for us your understanding of... there are voices inside the coalition party room who will be proposing that you be flogged off and privatised along with Australia Post and SBS and all the other stuff. Can you just confirm for me your understanding of your legal obligations in terms of the part or whole sale of NBN Corporation?
I'm not even sure that I understand the question.
There are legislative preconditions for the sale of NBN.
Oh, okay.
Just wondering if you're aware of what they are.
Oh, okay. Firstly, there is no, at NBN, and that includes me, no conversation about any path to privatisation. None at all.
Inside the company?
Inside the
What about inside the coalition party room?
I have no insights into the
Have you spoken?
And neither do you, Senator.
No, that's what I'm asking.
I might just add.
You feel free to enlighten us if you will.
There's nothing.
Just one point.
Of course.
So you're saying, Dr. Switkowski, that under new technology, the copper will deliver 100 megs or so?
We're on a path to get to 100 megabits per second on copper within several hundred metres of the node in the 2020s.
Is that what they're getting in the UK, similar?
They're not deploying that technology at the moment. In the UK, the best they've done is, I think, 80 but they're getting close. And this was a 2013 stat.
Thanks, Senator Ludlam.
That's all right. It's useful to clarify. And how many, while we're on that subject, how many people did you acknowledge were outside that 600 metre catchment?
I think in the copper footprint, it's 15% or thereabouts.
Of the overall 12
No,
million?
of the inside the copper network.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
15% of the households
million?
getting copper are 600 or more metres away from the node.
Okay, thanks.
Is that about 5 million, that figure you said?
It's about 5 million in the ultimate. At the moment, the number of households inside the Telstra copper footprint is probably 7 million of that order. That number's falling away as people do other things.
All right.
Can I just, before, I mean, the
I want to come back
raised
to
about
privatisation.
So I was asked the question about future funding, and evidently, and the original plan, which goes back a little way, anticipated tapping into the debt market.
Yeah.
Robin, I guess, in 2015. I think the context of the question was, will you be in a position to raise debt in a year's time? And the answer is no.
No. What about 2 years?
No.
What about ever?
Yes.
At what point do you think you're going to have the sort of financial metrics that will allow you to do that?
Well, there are two elements to that. One is the government has made clear thus far that the total amount of government equity will be $29.5 billion, and we know that the revised plan is going to cost more than that. So in order to complete the rollout, we're going to have to find alternative financing structures. We don't need to do that for some time, like some years, but if nothing else changes, we'll have to find another $10 to $14 billion of financing. Towards the end of the rollout, as the business model is proved out, whether your assumptions are right or mine, we'll know by then.
So if I'm right, you'll find that job a little bit easier.
Much easier, and I hope you're right. I really, really do. And there'll be any number of financing bodies that will want to partner up with NBN in terms of providing debt or other forms of financing to complete the rollout. But the other dimension here is that the cost-benefit analysis that's under the chair of Mike Vertigan may well reflect upon industry structure and government ownership of NBN and form other views. So we stand alert to what they might be.
Have you been approached, I'm not sure whether I put you this question before, have you been approached to provide some financial metrics for benefits, apart from the costs, which are presumably a lot easier to model, of building a network like the one you're building?
By the cost benefit?
Yeah, by
not yet,
panel.
but I would hope we will be. We will certainly volunteer them.
Yeah, okay, very good. So just coming back to your obligations as far as the part or total privatisation of NBNCo goes, are you familiar with how the Act is drafted that you operate under?
Not in details, but I would say the first step would be a discussion with the Minister, and I have no doubt that he is familiar with it.
I suspect he probably would be. This was hashed out in depth when the enabling legislation was put through. But just for your information, it's actually not legally possible for the company to be privatised until the network is complete. So I'm just wondering what your metrics for completion are as far as the terms of your Act are concerned.
Well, at this stage, Senator Ludlam, it's the strategic review scenario 6 that puts completion around 2020.
Okay, all right. We took evidence in Perth a couple of weeks ago in the Select Committee, including from a company that's been engaged, I believe, by some of your subcontractors to make much greater use of Telstra's existing network of pits and ducts. And it's a technology that effectively involves just blowing pressurised water through the ducts so that they can be more easily reused. Are you familiar with that company or that technology?
Only in having read the media reports.
Okay, but was your interest piqued by the media reports and the degree to which the costs and the time of the rollout was radically improved by reusing much more of Telstra's infrastructure?
Yes, and I think that was labelled as a micro-trenching technology. And look, we welcome every idea and every innovation.
So what did you do when you saw those press reports?
Well, I had a chat with people in the technology group.
What did they tell you?
They were, firstly familiar with the technology and were curious but not moved to immediately trial it.
Why is that? Yeah, all right. I find that a little bit inconceivable. The committee was impressed. We can't name the company for commercial and confidence reasons. We said we'd keep their identity confidential. But your pointy heads in the accounting department didn't think it was worth...
I didn't say the accounting department.
Engineers? Who advised you not to bother?
We have quite a number of projects and many ideas of ways in which we can reduce costs and accelerate the rollout. As I say, we welcome all those ideas. Where we feel that there's a reasonable chance that they could be put into practice, we'll follow up.
Can I commend that one to you and maybe pass that to your financial people? Maybe they'll be impressed in ways that others
Well, it's
weren't.
more to our, our operating people to see how it actually plays
Well,
out.
certainly I commend that to you. I think it would be well worth it.
So will you give me more information?
Maybe not at the table.
Okay.
We were asked to keep their material confidential. Look, my colleagues in Melbourne have approached us about a residents' association who've informed us that NBN's been rolled out in the whole neighbouring area around a particular estate, public housing estate in Carlton. Because of technical issues around MDUs, this particular estate's been left behind. I can be as specific as you like. And so they're now quite worried that they won't be connected. So I'm wondering if you can give us any comfort, and maybe you addressed this in passing in your opening statement. They've had a philanthropic offer for a wireless system for the whole estate if it can be connected to NBNCo's hardware. But it's the Carlton public housing estate across 6 buildings. I presume you're familiar with the area. It's just immediately north of Melbourne. The estate's listed as build commenced on the maps on your website. So I'm just wondering whether the rollout's flowing around those estates or whether you can give them some comfort tonight.
I guess we'll take that one on notice and get more information. I'm familiar with the area. It's adjacent to the university and the cemetery, but I don't know what the build out.
The boundaries sort of between Lygon Street, Drummond, Elgin, Nicholson Street.
Yeah,
so it's that block immediately north of town.
We shall follow up.
If you could, and I guess they're very concerned that the rollout's effectively going to flow around them. So I'm wondering what your policy is on public housing as a whole. Is there anything there that might affect them? As in, there's no policy to exclude
Public housing is included in our footprint.
I would have thought so.
There's some process issues which we have tackled in most of the states now, but not all, in terms of getting approval from the actual state governments who are officially the owners of those premises, because there's a lot of approval process steps that they actually have to positively wave us through. That has resulted in some delays in some areas, but most of that is now dealt with.
Are you aware of whether this
No, on
area
that
I'm
one
speaking
specifically, I will have to take on notice and revert with the answer on the specifics of that one.
All right. So look, I might run through. Yeah, well, I'll just run through what I was going to put on notice, given these gentlemen can't help me from the table, and if you can just, so that you've got a bit of structure around what I'm asking, whether each apartment is intended to be connected, or whether you're going to try one of these, whatever it is, units in the basement,
Fibre to the basement,
which I know your minister is very interested in, or whether you'll be cabling up each apartment. Where we can find some confirmation about the status of when they will eventually be connected, and whether private homes around the public housing areas have been connected before the public housing estates, and if so, why that would be the case. So anything at all that you can provide us to give them some confidence would be greatly appreciated.
we shall certainly do that.
If I'm out of time, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ludlam. Senator